Well, good morning. So we've been working our way through John Gottman's book, The 7 Principles for Making Marriage Work, and we're on principle number 4, which is let your partner influence you. And he goes on to say, studies show that the happiest, most stable marriages in the long run were those in which the husband did not resist sharing power and decision-making with the wife. When the couples disagreed, these husbands actively searched for common ground rather than insisting on getting their own way. Now, these results are primarily targeted at husbands, but obviously it goes both ways. And if either partner is willing to accept the other partner's influence, it strengthens their friendship. So, and he goes into pretty good detail about, for whatever reasons, cultural, social upbringing, typically women tend to be more orientated toward discussing and understanding feelings than our men. Historically, men were expected to be in charge. And so today, adapting to these changing gender roles can bring up core issues in today's relationships. But he says the good news is that men seem to be more emotionally intelligent now than in previous decades. I believe the emotionally intelligent husband is the next step in social evolution, which he says is basically learning how to honor his wife and convey his respect for her. It's really that elementary. Another plus, I suppose, is that husbands who can accept influence from their wives tend to be outstanding fathers. So that's the theory, and that's from his experience in the studies. So again, as in previous chapters, he has an accepting influence questionnaire. The scoring's a bit different, but 6 or higher, you're pretty willing to accept influence from your partner. 6 or under, probably need some work. And then 2 exercises aimed at helping couples move forward. So the first one is, he calls it yield to win. And he lists a number of common situations faced by couples, and then readers are asked to write down the request in a sentence. Sometimes the request is implied, there's a lot of energy around it, but what's actually being asked, and then B, what you could say to express your cooperation. And there's no right answers, but at the end of the exercise, he does give some what he considers effective responses. So, and the important point here, I think, is to try and get a sense of the urgency of the issue rather than see it as an attack on you. And I know too that often the ways how something is said is more important than the what. If my partner comes on too strong, it's harder not to get defensive. So here's, for example, a typical situation. Again, we go to number 4. Sometimes you make a bit of a mess in the living room when you get home from work, but usually you usually clean it up after dinner when you have more energy. One night when you haven't cleaned up, your wife says, "It really makes me mad the way you leave your stuff around. I'm tired too. I wish I didn't have to pick up after you. Why can't you clean up after dinner?" So that would be maybe a typical scenario. And so what's the reasonable part of the wife's request? And then what do you say? And you fill out, then at the end of the exercise, he gives these suggested answers. The reasonable part of the wife's request is for you to clean up before dinner. And you could say, "Okay, sorry, I'll do it," and then follow through. The second exercise is what he calls Gottman's island survival game. So you and your partner are stranded on a deserted island. There's a bunch of stuff on the beach from the boat that sank that you were on, but you're the only ones on the island. And so there's a list of items that you found. And so you can only pick up 10. So what 10 would you choose for your survival? And each partner writes down on a separate piece of paper what they consider the 10 most important items to keep, and then order these items based on the importance to you. And then you share your list with your partner to try to come up with a common list. So obviously there's going to be some give and take, I think. At the end of the exercise, there's a scoring mechanism to evaluate how the game went as far as accepting influence. So again, this is principle number 4. Remember, we're working our way through 7 principles, and he says The importance of accepting influence helps in coping with marital conflict, which will be the content of the next two principles. So, but before we get there, before sharing the next two principles, he explores the two categories marital conflict tends to fall into. And he says it tends to fall into those that can be resolved and those that are perpetual, which means they will be part of your life forever in some form or another. So that's what we'll look at next week. So even before we get into the principle 5 and 6, we're going to look at the two types of marital conflict. Okay, have a great week. Cheers.